and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/140, and you can email the show pedalshift@pedalshift.net or call the voicemail hotline 202-930-1109, and you can check out Pedalshift on all the socials as well. Hello everybody, it's Tim Mooney back again with episode number 140 of the Pedalshift Project. So glad to have you here for this episode. Got a lot of fun stuff happening, as usual here. I think I always say that. And might as well just kick it off with some follow-up. I wanted to kind of throw out a little bit of a roadmap about what's going to be going on over the next couple of weeks here on the show. The tour of the Great Allegheny Passage by Brompton is my last real big tour of the season. I might get out on a weekend or two, depending on how weather goes for the remainder of the year, but this is the last big one that's happening. I'm pulling together the pack list. I'm pulling together some more modifications on the setup for the Brompton. I just bought a new water bottle situation for it. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's going to be a really epic fall ride. The foliage around here in the DC area is super delayed. So although I think it's probably a little bit further along around the Great Allegheny Passage area, there's a possibility that I might have set myself up inadvertently for a really beautiful ride. So I'm super stoked about that. Tour Journals Volume 12 kicks off in 2 weeks with the ride preview. So that'll actually be, the ride preview will be released on that Thursday. I'll actually be on the trail at that point. So it'll be a little bit of a ride preview while I'm actually cycling. So that'll be fun. And then the following week, we'll get into all of the Tour Journals as you're used to hearing. Next week, however, we're going to be having one of those classic best of episodes, this time for real, on the Erie Canal episode that I did from a few years ago. Many of you who were here for the show a few weeks ago, I promoted the heck out of it, and it turned out I had the list reversed and it was a different one, but it was a really good best of list past a couple of weeks ago. But this one is a really good one on the Erie Canal tour. For those of you who are new to the show, I'm from Western New York originally, so this was kind of a getting back to basics tour, getting back to the trail that sort of possibly was the inspiration for me getting into bike touring in the first place. So check that out next week. Last but not least, on the follow-up, we've got another 5-star review. If you're interested in helping out the show, last week we talked about getting involved with the Pedalshift Society. That's just throwing a few bucks in the jar every month. That's, of course, you can still do that. That's pedalshift.net/society. Helps to defray the cost of the show. If the money thing's not in the ballpark right now, may I suggest, if you haven't already, giving a review over on iTunes. It helps other people see the show. You probably, if you listen to podcasts at all, people always are begging, please give a 5-star review, write a review. So I always like to give a shout out to the folks who do that. And on this episode, this was actually from a few weeks ago, we Tailwind by Go Contra, and he or she says, "What a wonderful podcast with a ton of info. Tim really puts the fire in you to ride your ride. Thank you." Thank you, Go Contra. I appreciate that. And thank you for the 5-star review. I just thought it was kind of interesting. I never really paid attention to how many reviews and ratings I have out there. We have 83 total ratings, 80 of which, that's a pretty good percentage, are 5-star. I got a couple of 4 stars. And then there was that one 2-star person from a few years ago who I wish I knew. I wish I could have a chat with. But, that's the only one that's out there. So the vast majority of you who are giving ratings really dig the show, and I'm really happy to hear that. So thank you very much. Next up on the show is The Lab. It's a third episode in a row. I think that October has become the Lab month. I wish I had known that. I would have said October is the Lab month at the top of October. But anyways, here we are. The Lab. We are in the lab, always talking about experimental things, tips, tricks, experiments, things that help you tour better. And on this episode, this is a topic that has been requested before. But it's something you might not be thinking about a lot when you're out on tour, and that is doing laundry, washing your clothes. The one nice thing about bike touring and factoring in laundry is you can reduce the amount of clothing that you bring. I know this sounds like rocket science. Hint, it's not rocket science. But, for so many people, the number one thing that they find over time is that by reducing the amount of clothing that they bring, the better their riding is. They reduce their bulk, they reduce their weight. And so if you go into it thinking, you know what, I don't need to carry 4 different changes of clothes, that's going to help you a lot. One of the ways that you can do that, of course, is by getting things that don't need to be washed very often. We talked about that a couple of episodes, having things like merino wool, things like that resist smells that you can wear over and over again and not have to get into washing. But of course, washing is another way to do it. So let's talk about laundry and doing laundry while you're on tour. The beginning question is sort of questioning the premise of the question, the beginning response, I should say. And that is, do you really need to do laundry? Natural fibers like wool and a few other things can stand up to a lot of wear without washing. And we've talked about that on the show a few times. I think that is something that you should factor in. It's also when you get nicer pieces of, say, merino wool or whatever, they tend to last longer. They tend to be things that you'll want to wear in the future. It's an investment, but it's something that can really be helpful for you, not just for touring, but for your overall wardrobe. I'm finding as I look in my crammed dresser of cotton t-shirts, I wear the same things over and over again, and I just keep collecting often as gifts and things like that. I don't tend to buy a lot of stuff for myself these days. I just tend to have a lot of stuff I don't wear. And, I'm trying very slowly to start to add things into my wardrobe, not just for bicycle touring, but for everyday life, that are high quality things that I can keep and will be happy to keep. Timeless things that aren't necessarily going to go in and out of fashion, stuff like that. So consider that as a part of how you're going to outfit yourself for your bike touring. Now, this kind of goes against my grain a little bit because normally I say, hey, use what you got. But as you're buying new things for yourself, consider spending maybe a little bit more to get something a little higher quality that'll last a little bit longer and that will fit your needs. One of those needs might be getting something that's made out of a natural fiber that can be used for tour that you don't have to wash as much. Okay, so there's all of that. That's sort of I'm going to question the premise of the whole laundry thing. The next are a list of different options that you've got while you're out on tour and you've got dirty clothes. And often I find clothes may not mean so much dirty as they are just wet. One of the things that I find when I am touring is that I will have an item that I've been caught in the rain or otherwise something is just wet and the temperatures and the lack of sun or the massive amount of rain as I've had on some tours, just stuff gets wet and there's no way for it to dry. So one of the things that you may be running into is you don't necessarily need to wash stuff, but you need to dry stuff. And for many of these options, of course, drying is a major feature. So we'll get into that as well. The first thing that I think is worth checking into is something I actually don't even do when I'm at home. We are lucky enough to have a washer dryer set up both at the place we live at in DC and at my cabin in out in the woods out in West Virginia. So I don't need to go to a laundromat, but a laundromat is kind of the normal first thought for folks who do laundry while on tour. They're ubiquitous. They are global. They are everywhere. And if you're even in a small town, often it'll be, all right, the smallest of small towns will have a post office and a gas station maybe. But then the next thing that they almost always have is a vape shop. And then after that, see what I was doing there? After the vape shop, they'll have a laundromat. So that's something that you can find in lots and lots of places. But the first thing I'm going to start off with is not just going in and plunking in quarters. The first thing I'm going to have you consider is doing Fluff and Fold service. This may be at a place that doesn't necessarily have a laundromat, but maybe a dry cleaner, but no machines. Take a look at that at some point because it's nice to often have stuff done for you, and it might be pretty economical when all is said and done. If you're in a town and say there's a campsite that's just out of town, or maybe you're staying at a B&B, or maybe you're staying at a hostel or something along those lines, The local dry cleaner or laundromat may have a service where you throw a few bucks at them and give them your bag of dirty clothes. And within a few hours, or at worst by the next day, you'll get them back to you folded and nice and clean. That's really kind of nice. The cost can vary a lot depending on your location. Here in the States, the average price to wash, dry, and fold clothes is somewhere between 90 cents US to $3 US a pound, according to Angie's List. Now, if you're doing it right, you're not going to have many pounds of laundry. Some places will have a minimum charge. It'll say 5 pounds minimum, in which case it's probably not a great idea for you to do. But it might be something that's good for you that if you don't want to sit there and wait for your clothes to get done, you are in a town where you want to do something, or you're just tired and exhausted and you just want to go to sleep. This might be a great opportunity for you to have someone take care of your laundry for you, and then you take care of business on your touring stuff, whether that's sleeping, eating, drinking, whatever you want to do. Seeing the sights, who knows? The alternative, of course, that is sitting there at a laundromat and waiting. Now, this is what I tend to do, but as I've sort of plunked a bunch of quarters in machines over the years, I've often thought, this might not be the most economical way or the most cost competitive way to go about things if Fluff and Fold is available. So let's say that your Fluff and Fold bill would be somewhere between $5 and $10. Let's say it would be about $7. Often I'm plunking at least $5 worth of quarters into both a laundromat machine and then a dryer, not to mention often I'll have to buy a thing of soap as well. If you add up all the costs of, say, a $2.50 laundry machine and then a $3 dryer plus $2 worth of soap, let's say 5 carry the 1, you're almost in that sort of $8, $9 range to begin with. And you have to sit there and do all the work. So if there is an option for you for the Fluff and Fold, you may find that that's a better deal. Or if it's even just $1 or $2 more, that may be a much better deal for you because your clothes are then safe. They're taken care of. You got a receipt. Somebody is doing it for you, and you can go off and do whatever you would like, which is to not sit there and do your laundry. Now, here's the sidebar to all of this. How many of you are wearing your rain pants and your rain jacket while you're doing laundry because that's the only thing that you've got available? Yeah, sometimes you got to do the laundry because honestly, you are not in a socially presentable mode, shall we say? Walking around town in your rain pants and your rain jacket and nothing underneath. Not exactly a good look. So sometimes this might not be a great idea, but it's something to consider. I don't know why it's more socially acceptable to sit at the laundromat and all of that, as opposed to going around town, but at least you're exposing yourself to fewer people. And I just realized the double entendre of that sentence. Sorry. Okay. So you've got your Fluff and Folds, you got your laundromat and weights. I think that this is sort of what most people end up doing, the laundromat and weight. Another sidebar to this, we've talked about dealing with a wet tent, One of the things that I think I talked about in that episode is that laundromats can be a not always every time idea, but if you've got a wet tent, that may be a good place for you to get a quick dry out of a very, very soaked tent. I had to do that, and I think I've told this story at least several times. One of my very first bike tours was a little less than 10 years ago, and I was just hammered. It was about 7-8 years ago this time of year in October, which is normally a glorious time to do the California coast, the Northern California coast. It's usually pretty dry. Well, we got hammered with rain, just hammered, and my tent was just soaked. And one of the things that we had to do was go with a packed wet tent and then riding all day in the wet. Ended up going into Fort Bragg, California, and threw the tent into a dryer. Now, that's something that I had never done before, but one of the guys that I was riding in the climate ride was for that, was like, yeah, every once in a while, it's not a bad idea to do it. And so I went ahead and did it, and my tent didn't tear itself apart and everything was fine. It's not something that I recommend that you do very often, but if you are there anyways and you're doing a load of laundry, very often we don't have a ton of clothes. And so one of these big industrial dryers, they're available. You've got your clothes. If you've got a tent that's soaking wet too, or even just a little bit wet, it's not a terrible idea. One thing I would say is those dryers sometimes get really, 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 really hot. And if there's a temperature control on it, you're going to want to knock that way the heck down. Of course, that's going to slow down the drying of your clothes, balance it all out. Maybe what you do, if you can change the temperature in the middle of the load, you can run it for a little bit cooler for a while and then take the tent out when it's done and then really hammer up the heat for your other clothes. By the way, not recommended for wool to dry in a really hot dryer. Don't do that. You will have a teeny tiny little thing of wool, and it's just not a great idea. So that's the sidebar on doing with a laundromat. Laundromats can be good to take a little bit of a break too. You're doing something, you're forwarding the sense of your ride, and you're also maybe taking like a half day off, or maybe it's a 0 day. It's a good contemplative thing to do. I always have my phone with me, so I'm listening to podcasts and music and stuff like that, no matter what. What if you don't have an opportunity to hit a laundromat? Maybe you don't have the time, and maybe you just don't have the time. One of the alternatives that I've done quite a bit on tour is the tried and true method of showering in your clothing. And it's a great way to wash your clothes. It's obviously a terrible way to dry them. So this is something that I would recommend if you've got dry conditions, where maybe you can either, if you're on a 0 day, hang stuff out to air dry, or if you're going to be rolling and you still have wet clothes, you can sort of secure them with bungees to the back of your bike or on the front of your bike if you've got a front rack to dry while you ride. I prefer using Dr. Bronner's soap for stuff like this. It's a good concentrated soap. It's biodegradable. It's got all of the wonderful elements of using Dr. Bronner's. As I said, the downside is your drying situation. It sometimes can take more than overnight. I'm often cycling, as you all know, on the West Coast, and often when I'm doing that in the summer, it's cloudy, it's cool, and stuff just doesn't dry. For situations like that, it's not often a bad idea to do the wash in the shower thing and then find a laundromat to do the drying trick. That can help. Sometimes there'll be some sunny periods where I can dry stuff out on the bike, but this is an incomplete way to do things. I will say, this past tour that I did out in Oregon, there were times when I had some pretty stinky stuff and I resisted doing this because I knew I didn't have an opportunity to dry, and I probably should have, and just switched into some different clothing. I often am carrying at least a secondary shirt with me, and I think that that's probably a good way to do it. Get into a rotation with things. I don't like putting on wet things again when I can avoid it, but sometimes you have to. And frankly, your body heat's going to dry things out as you roll anyways. So that might be another option for you as well. Last couple of things are alternatives to the kind of camp shower or the shower with your clothes on and wash them that way. And I think that these can be really, really useful, especially for maybe undergarments and for cycling shorts and things along those lines, things that really you want to kind of do a better job of washing rather than just having water run over with a little bit of soap. The first one is a kind of a low-tech way of doing it, and the second way is kind of a more high-tech way of doing it. First is, if you've got a waterproof pannier, go ahead and empty that all out. Get rid of the stuff in it and fill it up with some water and with some soap, and throw your dirty clothes in that and give it a good long shake. That actually works pretty well for a variety of different things. Is it going to get it really super, super clean? No. But I do find, especially if you need to give items a bit of a soak, as we so often do, it can work out pretty well. Then what you need to do is you want to make sure that you rinse things out really, really well. That might be a good situation. This is a great idea if you are in a scenario where you are at a campsite that maybe doesn't have running water or things like that, but you do have a water source. That can be a helpful place and a helpful way to do it. That's sort of the lowest tech way to have that be an option for you. Second thing is a little bit more of a fancier, higher tech thing, and it may be worth the bulk to you. And it's not super bulky in many cases, and that's some kind of a fancy laundry gizmo like the Scrubba or any of the variety of things that are out there. A lot of times these are done in buckets or balls, and they're meant for RVs, so they're not really good for bicycle touring. The Scrubba, I think, is a different animal because it is more like a bag. In fact, they have one that's more like a backpack. It's not that big, and It also has the added benefit, instead of just being your pannier, it's got some scrubbing bristles inside of it as well. So it does make things work out a little bit better. If you don't mind wearing a backpack while you cycle, I tend not to. This might actually be a good way to do laundry while you're actually riding, because you're going to be agitating it as you ride along anyways. So that might be something that could be something to look at for those of you who are looking for something maybe a little bit more high tech. I think you will find your results will be much better with a technique like that compared to the stand in a shower and soap yourself up technique or the pannier as washing machine technique, because it is actually built and does do some actual agitation. I've got a link in the show notes. You can check that out for one of the versions of the scrubber that's out there. And you can see there's all sorts of other things. It might be an option for you. It might be something worth taking a look at if you are really intent on doing laundry on a longer term tour that might not have as much, shall we say, access to laundromats, or you're wanting to do maybe the laundry yourself and you want to air dry and save the money as much as you can, or maybe you want to do the laundry but you're fine heading into a laundromat just for a dryer from time to time. All of those things are in the realm of possible. One last thing to remember to bring with you is a little bit of paracord. It's super light, it's super cheap, and that can be great as a drying line. So often I'm finding that I see people at camp, they're laying their clothes out over their bikes and everything like that, and that can be helpful. But a length of paracord is really not that expensive. It doesn't weigh that much. You can stick it in the bottom corner of one of your panniers, and it can be a really helpful type of thing to have as a drying line, regardless of any of the in-camp versions of laundry that you end up doing. So a little bit of paracord goes a long way. Recommended extra to bring along with you, and you can use it for more than a drying line as well. So to sum it all up, laundry on tour. Number 1, do you really need to do it? You may be able to find ways to avoid doing it, especially for shorter tours. Number 2, consider the fluff and fold situation in any town that you're in. It may be cost advantageous to time advantageous for you to pay someone else to do the work for you. Number 3, of course, laundromat and wait. Number 4, shower in your clothes. Number 5, the pannier as your washing machine. Number 6, fancy gizmos like the scrubber. And number 7, of course, don't forget the paracord. That's some tips from me and the lab on how to do laundry while you're on a bicycle tour. And we like to close out the show with a big thank you to all of the supporters of the Pedalshift Project through the Pedalshift Society. If you like what you hear, you can help maintain Pedalshift as an independent, listener-supported voice while expanding the offerings. We're talking $5, $2, or even $1 a month helps with the cost of hosting the podcast, the website, and more. And you can do it for a little bit, cancel anytime. One-shot support's welcome if you're not into the whole small monthly thing. And you can check it all out and join at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Ethan Georgi, Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lien, Andrew MacGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Seth Krieger, Marco Lowe, Terrance Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadas, John Sikorski, Richard Killian, Chris Barron, Brian Hren, Mark Van Raam, Brad Hipwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Ruth DeVorsey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Bobby Ruppel, Roy Everett, Greg Braithwaite, John Mayer, William Cairns, Sandy Pizzio, Richard Patch, Mark Messer, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Dave Roll, Joseph Quinn, John Baxter, Susan Brewster, Drew Porter, Brian Patterson, and thank you to all anonymous and past contributors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.